Good morning, everybody. Dear friends, I'm very glad to be here with you this morning. It's a pleasure to be in Budapest, in this country I like very much. I would particularly thanks the University of Public Service for its invite to come and talk about a fascinating subject and a crucial subject. The next European election may be the most important European election since decades, with a lot of consequences possible for the continent and for you, for all people of Europe. So before we start, allow me to introduce myself with a few words. My name is Charles Sapin. I'm a political journalist from France. I work for the main news magazine called Le Point. I just published a book about the rise of nationalist and conservatist forces in Europe. I'm sorry it's not available in Hungarian yet. I will ask for it, and I will introduce you the great debaters here. Barbara Hegedűs, you're vice-mayor of Veszprém. You're a member of the European Committee of Region, and if polls are right, you're a future Fidesz member of the European Parliament. Thank you very much to be here. I think you all know Liliana Smiech, our host. Thank you very much to invite us to talk. You're the international director of the Hungarian Public Service University and the chairwoman of the Warsaw Institute. And last but not least, Lorenzo Bernasconi, you're a member of conservative think tank, the Machiavelli Center, and you're a former consultant of the European Parliament and the Italian government. Thank you very much to be here. Let's start to discuss the forthcoming European election. Barbara, I saw you shaking your head when I said that this European election will be one of the most important since a decade. You agree with this statement?
Thank you very much, first of all. Thank you very much for the invitation. I'm very happy to be here. It's a very special occasion for me, as I'm a former student of the Ludovica, also because I made my PhD studies here in security studies, a little bit nearby in the Zrínyi campus. So I'm very happy that now I can participate in the Ludovica Festival and in this panel discussion. Yes, I am a deputy mayor now in Veszprém, and I am a candidate of the Fidesz party in the European Parliament elections. And I think it's a very intense and a very interesting period in our life, in the European Parliament. A few days ago, we celebrated our 20th anniversary that we are member of the European Parliament. And now we can see that the European Parliament elections, of course, it was important earlier also, but actually, I think in our normal life, in our cities or in our municipalities, we went to vote, but there was very low attendance, and there were no bigger topics. I think that normally the people didn't know too much about the European Parliament. What are the most important topics of it? What are the most important decisions? But I think the last years in Hungary, it has changed a lot. And it changed a lot because we see that in the institutional level, the European Parliament has grown power, and they would like to receive more power among the European Parliament institutions. And we see that there are so important questions which can affect not just the European Parliament level, but in the globally, it is more and more important. One of them, I think, that what are the future of the nations, and what we would like to hear in Europe. And your question is very interesting because, and it's very hard to concentrate on it, because one level I would like to say that in the European Parliament level, it's very important that the next decades how Europe can determine its interests, what's the European interest among the global level. And in Hungary and in our level, we can say that for us it's very important how the nations can maintain their influence and how the nations can maintain then their subsidiarity, their sovereignty in the next decades.
Yeah, it's a big issue. We're gonna do a quick turn about this question. Liliana, for you, these European elections are special from the other one before?
Thank you very much for this question, and I would like to also thank the real organizers of the Ludovica Festival, Orshoja Horvat and Anet Sabo, for great coordination, and thanks a lot for their teams. Because it's because of them we are here and we can, discuss important topics. And going back to the question.
Thank you very much for the organization.
Going back to the question, you asked if those elections are special.
Yeah.
I think all elections are special, depending on the interest of the country. But I think these elections are particularly interesting because I have the feeling that right now what's happening in Brussels, I mean, Brussels in a certain way became a capital of actually fighting with some kind of a freedom. I don't know if you will agree with me or not, but if we look at the treaties, if we look at the real European values, what is written there? Freedom, democracy, human rights, and so on and so on. And I have the feeling that somehow the policymakers there and also some leaders of the Western European countries forgot about it. And I believe that these upcoming elections would actually decide whether we will go into this direction or whether the specific sovereign countries will have more influence on, first of all, their actions internally within their countries and how much influence they will have into Brussels. So, yeah, I think these elections are very important. I have the feeling that, before each of the elections, we are saying that these are the most important elections and we cannot forget about them.
Yeah, that's true, but this one...
But this one, these ones are very, very important. I mean, in Poland, last year we had very important parliamentary elections. We will also have we actually already had the city council elections. Now the EU elections, that would be very important, but at the same time, there are also US elections that would be also very important. And they will also, the result will influence the possible transatlantic relation between EU and US. So yes, I agree, the elections are extremely important.
This is very interesting. Lorenzo, you agree? It's the election of the big choice?
Well, every 5 years, I hear this thing, okay, this election is the game changer, this election will change everything. And at the end of the day, it was told in 2014, in 2019, will this election change the face of Europe? I don't believe so. But at the same time, it's crucial for conservative forces because you don't have many conservative governments at the moment in Europe. So I don't think, because look at the numbers, look at the figures, because at the end of the day, data are the only thing that is objective. According to the polls, conservative forces will not gain a majority in the next parliament. but they will be strong enough to block some decisions that will have consequences in the long term, because some decisions you take at European level will have consequences not for the duration of a term, but for the next 20, 30, 50 years. So I think, yes, this election will not change, I think, the approach of the European Commission, of the European institution on some key issues, but could help to limit, could help to block some very bad approaches that
And
the current Commission...
This is a big deal, like the capacity to block something. Like we spent like 5 years to discuss about like the Green Deal. If we had like stronger groups, right groups, to stop the Green Deal, that's a big change, right?
Yeah, absolutely. The problem is that the challenge for a right-wing group, for conservative forces, is to be able to build a different vision of Europe, a different idea of Europe. It takes time. They will have these 5 years to work on this proposal, to work on this idea, because globalist forces have a very defined and clear set of values. Borders are bad things. The world should be shaped around the needs of the global financial market. And the nation state is a problem, is a source of war, except for Ukraine, because in the globalist vision, all nation states are bad, except for Ukraine. I don't know why, but I have a few ideas, but that's another story. Well, while on the right wing, since conservative forces encourage and give value to differences, to identities, of course, it's harder to build a common vision. It's harder to build a proposal of reform of the European Union that could work and be acceptable for everybody. That's one of the reasons for which we have two relatively large...
You're excellent, Lorenzo. There is one problem. You start to answer to all the questions of the panel. Yeah, but you're right. It's a very interesting. Those questions we're gonna ask. Yeah, I understand. Like for you, it's a kind of a special election, but beware, that's not going to be the big revolution. We have to be like, okay. Maybe it can be interesting to ask ourselves why those forces, conservative and nationalist forces, are in dynamics in this continent. When we see the polls in Europe, there is a real wave behind nationalist and conservative force. You see, in my country, in France, the national rally of Marine Le Pen is very, very high on the polls. It's the first party. So the FPO in Austria, so the PVV of Geert Wilders in Netherlands, Fratelli d'Italia of Giorgia Meloni in Italy, and of course the Fidesz of Viktor Orban. So how can we explain this dynamics of these forces? There is one question maybe that seems to recur from a European country to another, regardless of borders, of voting system, of national history. It's the question of immigration. For you, this issue of immigration is one of the primary drivers of nationalist and conservative forces. Who want to answer?
Well, I can start, but you didn't mention actually Poland when we were talking about the rise of the right-wing parties.
Yeah, sorry, because
we had elections
exactly.
Last year, and to be honest, actually, Law and Justice did not lose.
No,
since 2014, Law and Justice won every elections. The problem is that then they don't have the majority.
They arrived first with 35%, right?
Yeah, but the idea is that there was no majority.
Yeah.
But at the end, of course, the right wing Law and Justice still won the election, and since 2014, nothing has changed. And regarding the immigration question, whether this actually drives those nationalistic, more right-wing movements, I think it's one of the components, truly. It's one of the components. I wouldn't say it's the only one, because in the EU, if we look at the mainstream, at the Brussels mainstream, I have the feeling that we are standing in front of the swimming pool and we are trying to jump, but we forgot to pour water there. And I think that's what we're doing right now in the EU with most of the policies. So we had something in our mind, we thought that it's a good idea, but we didn't take into account, for example, society and other factors into it. And it's the case of Green Deal, for example. You know, if you look at the values, perfect, you know, we should be more sustainable, I totally agree. But on the other hand, EU is completely losing if you look at the competitiveness. If you look at the automotive sector, Germany, a previous leader of the automotive sector, not just in Europe, but if you look at the whole world scene, now it's losing. Now it's losing. Most of the EV cars, for example, that are being sold in the EU are either Chinese or are either American. Because our own are too expensive and people just cannot afford it. People just cannot afford to go along with the policies that are being proposed. There's a lack of this human into it. And I think it's not just the case of this one certain policy. We're forgetting about people. We're forgetting about people, and I feel that national movements, right-wing parties are putting human in the center. They're putting human in the center. So the upcoming elections are firstly about human, about our dignity. They are about security. We want to be secure. We want to be normal. And we also want to be competitive on the global scene.
Okay. Barbara?
No more questions. No.
No, but it's interesting. So immigration is one of the primary drivers, but not at all the only one. Yeah. Okay, there is another factor I want to discuss with you, Barbara. It's, you know, sorry, I've got...
Wind of change.
Yeah, the wind. Here we go. We see a fear in a large part of the European population of seeing their way of life changing, like called into question or even completely destroyed, particularly through radical societal demands, what we call the wokeism. Last year when I came in Budapest, I remember these big banners at the enter of the CPAC conference, like it's no country for a woke man. Are you agree with this statement that the fear for way of life, the question of identity is also a springboard for this new illiberals' right, in your opinion?
It's a very complex question. I try to answer in a concrete way. In the Committee of the Regions, which I am part of it, is an advisory body of the European Parliament. There, the Fidesz party is the member of the ECR, the conservative ones. And we have several debates and conferences, and on one conference here in Hungary, our slogan was the normality. And I think this is very important because we can talk about in an ideological way about political parties, right, left, or center right, center left, but I think these are not the important. The important is that we say that we are conservative or right-wing parties, that we would like to maintain the normality, and we would like to talk about questions that are really interesting for the people. And I think that's why in Europe we can see that the right-wing parties are growing and growing, because they are talking about issues that are important for the people. And there are some questions that now in the European Parliament campaign are very important, and these are very important because if we make bad decisions, we can't we can't correct them in the future. What I mean about it, for example, if you think about the illegal migration, if we are making bad decisions, then we can't correct it because our lifestyle, our economy, and our security will change so much that actually now it seems quite impossible to change it, to correct it. So that's why we have to be very careful, because, for example, the illegal migration, there are three very important aspects: the security, the economy, and our culture. What our culture heritage, what kind of lifestyle we would like to maintain. And in my opinion, if we want, I would like to mention ideologically a little bit, but if we think about what the left globally, or the socialism in globally wanted, I think disrupt the society, how they can divide the communities, how they can divide the people from each other. We experience it in the socialism also. What now we can see that with woke idealism in the globalist, what they would like. They would like to also divide the society, disrupt the society. That's why I think they attack the families, because stable families can maintain a nation, can maintain a culture, and they disrupt, they attacked now the person, the children also, for example, with the gender ideology. And I think they would like to attack this kind of way the society, because the divided, the person can be more influenced, and that's why they would like, in the European level, also destroy the nation's power, because then the people will have less power if the nations will be weaker.
I understand. There is like some parties for you, like they put subjects that can divide society to rules, and there is Lorenzo, a question for you. Like there is a new subject who exactly is beginning to divide society. It's you have a new polarization about the question of environment. It's funny because over the last few years, I don't know if you agree, but the environmental protection has been a matter of general agreement. Everybody was for preserved nature, and the problem has arisen with the new legislation, which is highly coercive and even punitive for people from the countryside or rural area. We saw that with the Green Deal, and Lorenzo, what are the consequences, political consequences of those new rules about environment, and this new polarization of environmental issue?
Thank you. Well, the difficult relationship between our civilization and the environment dates back to Plato's idea of the man, of the soul of human beings being something else from the world, something that does not belong to this world. And in a different way, this prejudice, this idea, found a path to history, to our era, and so there is this idea, this prejudice from the point of view that we are not part of the environment. We are kind of intruders, so we don't have the right to use the environment, to live in the environment like every other animal and plant and living being on this planet. So there is this idea that everything we do is bad. If a wolf is hunting a prey, well, it's nature. If we kill a cow or a pig to get food, that's evil. That's hypocrisy from my point of view, but it really got into the culture, the dominating culture in our continent, and especially in Brussels. So this kind of regulation come from an elite that basically lives out of the world, out of society. I used to work for the European Parliament for 7 years, so I know pretty well that kind of environment. Those are people that don't face real problems in their life because they don't have real problems. And they spend their time speculating on how bad our society is from the well-paid offices in the Berlaymont building or in the parliament. Well, the consequences, well, it's clear because we have this Eurocentric view that everything that happens in the world happens in Europe. Everything is important happens here. And the whole world wants to become like us. That's not true. That's not real. We keep closing our industries. We keep imposing expenses, imposing large investment on for the industries, for example, in the automotive sector, because we want to reduce pollution. Then we are forced to buy cars from China. If you go to China or to any other country in Asia, except maybe Korea, well, they don't care at all about environment. They throw anything into the rivers, into the sea. They don't have any kind of rules like we have. So are we really aware that we live on the same planet, that water, air moves? And if we just delocate pollution from Europe and we go and create more pollution without any kind of control and regulation in India or in China, it will affect us as well. So it's totally crazy, but it comes from this ideology where us as human beings are not part of the world. We are kind of intruders, invaders, then not as all as human beings, just the white European civilization, because of course Africa has its right to develop and to pollute in developing. China the same, India the same. It's just us. It's like this idea that we had enough. We had our time of prosperity in the past centuries. And so now we should act responsibly to the environment, even if the percentage of pollution produced in Europe, and even more the percentage of CO2, is a tiny percentage compared to the production of the whole world. And also the population of Europe is pretty stable since a few decades, while other countries are growing. In 2050, 1 kid out of 13 in the world will be Nigerian. And I don't really see Nigeria applying the same environment protection regulation that we build. But I think
it's a big subject. It's one of the big issues of the next European Parliament, I think so. We identified some of the big reasons why nationalist and conservative forces are in dynamics in Europe. Now I would like to turn our attention about the idea of the European Union, of these conservative and nationalist forces. I'm going to turn to you, Liliana, because you wanted to speak about Poland, and there is one speech that has made a big impression in Europe. It's the speech given by Morawiecki, the former prime minister, in this German university in Heidelberg, and he defined what could Europe of nation would be. It's can you explain to us what is this idea of Europe of nation, and is this the new model of Europe where we are going on?
Well, to be honest, I don't feel really competent because I did not hear to the
okay.
speech of
Okay.
my ex-prime minister. However, if I may just add one thing to the environmentalistic question, because I think it's very interesting. Like if we look at the interest of EU, if interest of certain specific countries, at the end of the day, first of all, we need to diversify our energy supplies, because as the EU, we don't really have much. And we need to face this fact. So, in Polish interest, it's not to import gas from Qatar at the end of the day. It's not in our interest to only import LNG from US, but we should diversify. And if you look at our own possibilities, we should either have nuclear, or we should invest in the renewables, which are, well, mainly for now produced in China, but maybe one day we will also have our own technology. So this is one thing. I believe we need to diversify our energy sources, and that's what happened after the Russian aggression on Ukraine. The second thing, and I think that's what is really disturbing, not just towards political elites, but towards normal citizens, is this hypocrisy that you mentioned. Because, I said to myself, okay, I can sacrifice my comfort, if that's the goal, I can do this. I will stop eating meat. I will start using only public transportation.
Stop the bath. And,
exactly. I will do this, okay? If that's the goal, I will do this. The problem at the same time is that commissioners in the European Commissions are increasing their budgets for private jet flights.
Yeah.
So what are those double standards? So on the one hand, I am supposed to abandon everything.
It sounds like unfair for you. Like
no,
it's illogical.
It's illogical. So, on the one hand, you require so much from the average citizens, where on the other hand, you are increasing your budgets. And it's a public information. You can just go to the webpage of the European Commission, Google it, and you will see each term they are increasing it. So, what's the point in it? And I think it's super unfair. Or the EU is dealing with the topics like emissions of the gases that are being produced by cows, and these are the topics that are on the agenda. I think there are much more important topics like energy poverty. So this is the problem that is actually touching normal average citizens. Energy poverty in Poland, the hidden energy poverty is around 20% in Poland. What it means that almost every fifth household in Poland is not able to pay for their house to be warm in winter. And exactly the same problems will be faced by Spain, but not in the winter, but in summer. Their houses will be super warm and they will be not able to make them cold. So these are the real problems, but as you mentioned, somehow there's this problem of perception, I think, in Brussels. There's no this ground approach towards the real problem of normal citizens.
Okay. It's interesting. Yeah, it's a big issue, the environment of the next European Parliament. But I will go back to my Europe of a nation. Barbara, maybe you can explain us what is the point of view of the Europe institution of nationalist and conservative forces. What the view of Viktor Orban, of Morawiecki, of all those nationalist or conservative leaders about what the European Union they dream on?
As I mentioned, we celebrated the 20th anniversary of our membership in the European Union. And when we entered to the Union, it was clear that all the nations have the same power. All the nations need to have the same responsibility, but the same opportunity also. And this is a group where all the opinions should be respected, and we have to make real debates, real agreements between the nations, what we would like to achieve. And step by step, we see that, for example, the last years, that the EU institutions and the EU used, for example, the crisis to to expand its power, its institutional power, not to solve the questions, not to solve the problems with the nations. For example, during the pandemic, it was more important how the EU can together, how they can together organize the vaccines and how this procedure will establish, not to help the nations that, okay, we need quick answers because the people's lives depends on it, how we can together work for it. And I think for example, in Brussels, when we have meetings, I feel also that we can't talk about. It's some kind of prohibited to talk about the real questions, and just the conservative forces try to put the real answer on the table. And I think now we are in this main level that actually we have to take actions to have real debates. For example, a few weeks ago, 2 weeks ago, we saw that in Brussels there was a conservative conference, and the authorities tried to prohibit it with members of the European Parliament, with politicians, with prime ministers. Viktor Orban participated also in this conference. And so it was shocking for us because it was in Hungary, for example, I'm young, I didn't experience it, but from my parents, I heard that this happened in the communism era. And now in Brussels, a conservative conference tried to be prohibited. So now I think that what we really talk about, that we have to respect the nations, we need to make real debates about real agreements, what are the most important questions in our lives, how we can solve it, and what are our debates also. We don't agree with each other in every question, but we need to talk about it and find together solutions. But we don't need this federalism. We don't need the institution to decide what the nations should do.
Okay. There is one big obstacle for nationalist and conservative forces to defend this idea of nation, to push the European institution to respect nation. You told it, Lorenzo, it's the problem is the figures of the polls, like conservative forces are in dynamics, but they will not be will not be enough to change totally the European Parliament. There is another obstacle for me. It's like even if all the nationalist and conservative forces are in dynamics and they all agree on the similar European project, they are divided in two groups in Strasbourg and Brussels. You have like the reformist and conservative ones with Giorgia Meloni and maybe the Fidesz member of the European Parliament in the next Parliament. And you have the group Identity and Democracy, the group of Marine Le Pen, the National Rally, and Matteo Salvini. Can you explain us the differences between those two groups, and these differences for you are or not an obstacle to really having influence in the next parliament?
Well, the problem from my point of view is that there is much more diversity among conservatives than among globalists, and that is normal to some extent. One of the reasons, for example, there are some historical rivalry, historical troubles, for example, between French and Germans, between Hungarian and Romanian, and of course, the European Union is also about resolving these kind of historical issues, but it takes time, and conservative voters often are the most sensitive on these issues. So that can be politically sensitive to try to put together parties from countries that have, let's say, open issues like this. On the other side, the problem is that the confrontation is not between left and right anymore. It's between forces that believe that our future must be shaped around the needs of the financial market, and people that believe that our future must be decided by the vote by the democratic vote of European people. That's the line of fracture. The fact that when you take one side, when you take the side of the people, you become a populist, you become a nationalist, you must face a war, an information war from media. You will be kicked out of the universities, maybe not in Hungary, luckily, but in Western Europe, in France, I think you can confirm, it's pretty hard to work or teach in a university and to have a, let's say, identitarian or even slightly right-wing view of the world. So, some forces took a stronger stance from this point of view. Okay, we are against globalization, we are against open borders, even if this means being called every day extremist and fascist and evil ones, basically. Other forces, especially when they are in the government, because when you are in a government, you need allies. At the moment, with the last government change in Poland, unfortunately, there are just two, let's say, large, strong conservative governments in Europe, Hungary and Italy. And when you are in power, you need friends, you need allies. You need to deal with Brussels, and you need to deal with Washington, too. It's inevitable. And so, of course, you need to be softer on some issues. A lot of people say, for example, that there were expectations from the Italian government to be tougher on immigration. That's a fact. Immigration is still a huge problem in Italy. But what will it mean to be tougher on immigration? To cut the relationship with Brussels and with Washington? And then how could you survive politically in a world that is so much interconnected, with a war ongoing at the gates of Europe, if you don't accept some kinds of compromise with forces that have nothing in common with you, that maybe hate you, because I don't think Mr. Biden and the American Democrats have any good opinion about Orban or about Meloni at the end of the day. But you have to deal with them because Biden is in power.
This will be one. We will see if in the next European Parliament, nationalists will be able to do some compromise between each other and with other forces. That's true.
Yeah, I hope so, and I think even if it is not immediately evident that if Trump will be the next president of the United States, that will help a lot European conservative forces to unite.
Thank you so much. That was very, very interesting. These subjects are very exciting. We could talk about it all the day, but we'll not. We will not. Maybe you have some question? No? Okay. I think, yeah, we need to let people have lunch and prepare themselves for the next debates. Thank you again. Thank you very much for this debate. That was very interesting. Thank you. Thank you all.